rights disaster. I yield back.
Senator Blackburn, they did not say they can't be located. They said that they had not even attempted to file
My time has
charging
expired. I yield
which is
back,
a very
Mr.
different
Chairman.
thing.
I'm going to give the witness an opportunity to finish his remarks.
I just want to know, the DHS report did not say these children were missing. It said that ICE had failed on the job to actually start the court process for them. If ICE filed the court documents, many of those people would be living at the exact address that the ICE told them. It's just ICE has not filed the charging documents. It's not that they're missing. And of course, exploitation is very real, and we've called for more labor enforcement to ensure it doesn't happen.
Senator Padilla.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And the fact that we're still discussing, debating the struggle to reconnect children who were separated from their parents more than 4 years ago today should tell us a lot about what to expect in the next administration. I think it's worthy of further conversation, maybe a different hearing, a different day to focus on that. Just as a reminder for folks that are observing today's hearing, that the stated topic of today's hearing is, quote, how mass deportations will separate American families, harm our armed forces, and devastate our economy. So I will attempt through my questions to bring us back to the focus of this hearing today. But first, I wanted to point out a couple of notes that I've taken throughout the hearing. In hearing from my colleagues on the committee, the issues they've raised, the questions they've raised, to underscore a statement I made at the outset, which is how complex this conversation in this policy area is. And so it requires thoughtful and nuanced solutions. Senator Graham was talking about the numbers, and even questioned witnesses of would you be opposed to someone who has had their day in court, he said, and has been denied a further stay in the United States after having had their day in court. That sheds light on process, due process, often lack thereof, representation in the process, lack of representation in the process. I'm for a process and finality of a process, a finality, an answer, clarity about your future in a matter of weeks and months, not years and years, but that requires investment in the process by the federal government, in hearing officers, in immigration judges. So let's just lay that out if we're going to be genuine and serious about tackling the backlogs and the issues. Second, man, if I had a nickel for every time I heard fentanyl in this committee, serious problem, but irresponsible in how it's misportrayed so often in immigration conversations. Fentanyl needs to be addressed. Fentanyl needs to be stopped. Its illegal importation needs to be tackled. But if we're going to do it thoughtfully and seriously, let's look at what the Customs and Border Protection Agency tells us. 80% of individuals who are prosecuted and convicted for bringing fentanyl into this country are United States citizens. Happy to share the link, folks. Happy to share the report. So if that's a concern, then let's address the heart of the concern and not just use it as a soundbite to further attack immigrants. Oh, by the way, did you know that the numbers at the southern border are way down? People talking about this crisis at the border. We always need to do more to ensure a safe, orderly, and humane border. But some of these numbers that are being tossed around are not what's happening today because of President Biden's policies this last year. So let's be intellectually honest with ourselves and the public. Now, that being said, Mr. Reckland-Melnick, you're pretty popular today. I have a question for you as well. As you know, and you've referenced, the largest mass deportation effort in U.S. history was President Eisenhower's Operation Wetback. I referenced it in my opening statements. During that operation, more than 500,000 Mexicans and many United States citizens were deported. And as far as anybody can tell, Operation Wetback did not achieve its intended effects of increasing employment rates or wages for U.S. workers. Former President Trump has said that he planned to model his deportations on Operation Wetback. Now, you testified today about the expected negative economic impacts of mass deportation, including the rising costs of food. Some estimates say food prices are going to go up 19% based on this alone. In what world does food become cheaper with mass deportations?
Mass deportations would not cause food prices to become cheaper. The exact opposite would occur. In fact, a single worksite raid in 2018 under the Trump administration at a beef plant in Tennessee led to ground beef prices rising by 25 cents for the year that the plant was out of operation following the raid.
And just to follow up to that question, I'm cognizant of my time, Mr. Chairman. I've referenced so many industries that have significant percentages of undocumented workforce in them. I think chief among them is the agricultural industry, not just nationally, but particularly in the state like California, the largest agricultural producing state in the nation, where estimates are well more than 75% of the workforce is undocumented. I hear from growers, as do all my colleagues. I hear from labor contractors, as do all my colleagues, about how easy it is for them to recruit United States citizens to do the work in the fields. And let me tell you how easy it is. It is not. There's a reason that the agricultural industry relies on immigrants, including so many undocumented immigrants, to help keep the food supply chain going, keep food on the tables of American families. And I invite my colleagues, if you want to get a taste of what it's like and the difficulties for the recruitment, to spend a day in the fields, like I did in 2022. Picking radishes and parsley, like Senator Booker did in 2023. Happy to work with growers and farm workers to provide that opportunity for all of you. Follow-up question, Mr. Reichlin-Malik. Just briefly describe to us what it would look like if the agricultural industry were suddenly to lose half of its workforce.
I mean, if it was overnight, the U.S. food supply would crumble. Undocumented workers work across the agricultural sector, from picking crops in the field to meat processing to poultry processing to dairy to everything in between. And these are workers that without them, our food supply would drastically diminish. I'm not saying that there's no jobs Americans will do. Of course, that's not true. Americans have done those jobs in the past, but it could take decades before we got enough workers to replace the experience and the knowledge of some of these workers who have been doing the jobs for 20, 30 years. It is not something that can just be replaced overnight and will cause severe impact to the U.S. food supply.
Thank you, Senator
Chair.
Padilla.
Violent criminals, let's go after them. The vast majority of immigrants and undocumented immigrants who are contributing so much to this country, they deserve better. Thank you.
Senator Tillis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to paint a picture of the crisis at the border and what the incoming administration has to deal with. Roughly 8 million people came into this country illegally from the outgoing administration's border policies. 8 million. Does anyone find that acceptable? I'm going to give you all a chance to answer that question shortly. The American people elected a new president in large part to secure the border and deport people who came illegally under their predecessor. So to my Democratic colleagues, how many illegal immigrants being deported by the new administration would you find objectionable? Mr. Melnick, I'll ask you, 1 million?
I think 1 million would be a disaster.
2 million?
Again, considering we're talking about law-abiding people who've been here for decades, I think that is enough that would have severe negative ramifications for the United States.
3 million?
Same answer.
5 million?
Same answer, even worse ramifications.
Do you think it would be fair or moral to deport any illegal immigrants?
Yes, I'm not a supporter of open borders, as I said before.
Well, I'm kind of curious what your position was back during the Obama administration when that's exactly what he did. I'm not reading what Trump intends to do. I'm reading exactly what President Barack Obama did when he came into office and deported nearly 5 million people, or in excess of 3 million people. So at that time, were you involved politically or in this space at the time that Obama was here? How old were you back then?
I was a graduate of law school and was working at the time.
Were you opining on deportations at that time?
I was not.
Do you believe that President Obama made a grave, horrible, inhumane mistake by deporting those folks?
Well, it wasn't 5 million people.
That came in under the Bush administration?
It wasn't 5 million people. When we're looking at
it was over 3
ICE
million,
deportations.
so let's not split hairs.
Actual numbers are closer to 1.5 internal ICE deportations. And there as well, it depends on the portfolio.
So you said President Obama was immoral and inappropriate to deport those million people. Is that what I heard you say?
There were many people that were deported
yes, no
under his
question.
administration
You
that should not have been. Yes.
Look, I don't normally get into these antagonistic sorts of discussions here, but it needs to be said because you just a month ago said at the turn of the century, Jim Crow was legal, lynchings were at their highest level in the U.S. history, women couldn't vote, the infant mortality rate was 165 per 1,000, and the average life expectancy was 47. And we also had quasi-open borders. That part wasn't bad. So let me tell you what I tell everyone who comes in this room and has the polarizing testimony, sir, that you have had. You're a part of the problem. I'm a part of a group of people here who have said, as the president did, incidentally, on Sunday, he believes there should be a path for dreamers. We're demonizing President Trump for something he may or may not do, but he has said to his Republican base he believes that there should be certainty for dreamers. He's also said that we have to have a secure border. And as long as the border is not secure, people like me who try to treat people who are in the state that they are here with respect and understanding some of the issues that Mr. Padilla brought up, you cause people to go into their corners and get nothing done. That is why Chair Durbin has not been able to fulfill the promise on dreamers every single year he's tried for the last 20, because people like you make it impossible to have let me finish, and then I'll let you speak as long as the chair wants to, have a rational discussion about it. Because if we don't secure the border, I can't get a path to citizenship for the DACA population. If we don't secure the border, I can't get Democrats and Republicans to come together and give certainty to the dreamer population. Are there any dreamers in the room? Raise your hand if you are. All right. Well, this is a part of the problem, ladies and gentlemen. You have an incoming Republican president who just said as late as Sunday that he's prepared to give you certainty. But we have people here demonizing him for asking the reasonable question of, can't we all agree that we need to secure the border? So if you are sincerely, I don't know how you make your money. I don't care what your political motives are. But number one, I would really appreciate it to say, if you would go out on social media and say that the President Obama did a horrible disservice to those people he deported, and he's as wrong-minded as every other Republican who said we've got to secure the border, deport people. Because you can't have one being okay and the other one not being okay. And if you don't come to the table and recognize in a world where, 100 years ago, it was probably safe to have a quasi-open border because the world order was changing and we emerged as a world leader. But today, we have terrorists that can fly from the Middle East, land in Mexico, and come across the border in less than 24 hours. We're not living in Ellis Island anymore. We've got a problem that can't be solved, and people like you are creating more obstacles to people like me who are willing to take hits from my own party to satisfy what people like Donald Trump want to get done. Thank you.
May I respond?
No. Thank you, Senator. It's my time, so I'm going to speak. First of all, I want to thank all of the witnesses. I think we're actually going to start making progress on securing the border and on a sensible and humane policy. I want to thank folks from the immigrant community and dreamers who I know are here and acknowledge my respect for the contributions you've made to our country, and I don't want to lose the benefit of that. As I've listened to my colleagues, I think it's not that complex. Number one, I think there is agreement we have to have a secure border. You can't have a country that doesn't have a control over its border. Second, I think there's broad consensus that criminals who are here should be deported. Ms. Moore, and I just want to acknowledge, as we all have, the incredible life you've had, the loss of your daughter, and your own experience. People who do that, they shouldn't have gotten in, and they shouldn't be here. And if they are here, they should be in jail. Third, we have the question of people whose status has been determined, but it took so long for that status to be determined, in many cases years and years, that they become an integral part of their community and they put roots down here and they haven't committed a crime. This is where we don't have consensus. There's a view among some, and I think the President-elect Trump has this view, that if you are here illegally, no matter how long it took for that adjudication to occur and no matter what your roots are, then you should go back. Senator Graham was indicating a view that if you've been adjudicated, fair is fair and you should go back. There's another point of view, and that is that if you have been here and we had a system that didn't adjudicate in any kind of timely way, and you have been working, I'll put it in very specific terms, on a farm in Vermont for 7 or for 8 or for 9 years, and you become a contributing member to the community and the economy, there's another approach one could take where you might pay a fine, you might have to make amends for the fact that you came here illegally, but there'd be an acknowledgement of the contributions you've made, the roots you've established, and what the harm to the community would be. And that certainly would be the case in Vermont. Just speaking about agriculture, I just can't imagine, actually I can't imagine, I've talked to some farmers who, if they lost their labor, would lose their farm because cows don't milk themselves and they are not able to get local labor to do that. So there is a real potential here for us to find common ground and get something done that is securing the border, that is deporting criminals, that is making judgments about allowing people the option of paying a fine, where there would be a deterrent as long as we have a secure border. You know, Ms. Moore, and I just want to ask you, you've suffered so much, and I want to express to you my gratitude for your advocacy on behalf of others. But if we had a secure border, you're advocating for that, if we have, and that keeps criminals out, right? Would it be in conflict with what you think would be a reasonable outcome for, like, dreamers, for instance, kids who came here with their parents, who've not committed any crime, who've become parts of the community? Would that be something that you would see as a reasonable outcome to find a way for them to have a legal status?
A couple of things from listening to everyone speak. One, as an American citizen and not a politician, so I don't know all the ins and outs, but just what I'm hearing is the bottom line is profit. To an American citizen, they're hearing you're putting profit above American lives. So that's the message you're communicating. For me personally, our country is made of immigrants. We have 250 years or more of immigrants that have come to this country and have built the country to what it is today. And we are descendants of those immigrants. The issue is having an open border that allows an invasion of people that compromises our national security because our borders, we don't have enough border agents to stem the flow of immigrants, but then also they bypass the law to speed up them coming in, and in doing so, they miss all the criminals that are coming into our country. So I think we need to put those laws back into place and to practice so we can catch them at the border. And then I think that we should work towards those that have come to the country. If it's illegal, the very word itself means unlawful. Mm-hmm. So Are we saying it's okay to come to America in an unlawful way? There has to be some kind of a line, a precedence of what is lawful and what isn't lawful.
Well, I thank you for that. I mean, the heart of, at least as I hear what you're saying, is that we have to have a secure border in the first place.
Yes.
Yeah, well, thank you again. My time is up, and I'm going to, are you next? Polly? Senator from Missouri.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks to the witnesses for being here. I have to say, I'm kind of amazed that we're holding this hearing. To me, it's remarkable that the idea of actually, as you were just saying, Ms. Moran, the idea of enforcing our laws, protecting our border, securing our streets from criminals, it's amazing that that's controversial at all. And it says something a lot about the other side of the dais that we're having this hearing today. Let me just ask you, Mr. Reifland-Melnick, I mean, is it really such a bad idea to deport people like the criminal who killed this young man? This is Travis Wolf. He was 12 years old when he was killed. He was mowed down, and I do mean mowed down, in a car by an illegal immigrant, 12 years of age, walking along a sidewalk in my state of Missouri, mowed down by an illegal immigrant who I think also had a prior criminal record. Is it such a bad idea to deport the person who killed him?
Any person who commits a heinous crime should suffer the consequences under the law.
Good. What about Officer David Lee? Officer David Lee was killed in Missouri just a few months ago by another illegal immigrant, once again in a car, who used it as a lethal weapon to ram him and kill him. Is it so wrong, such a bad idea to deport the illegal immigrant who killed this good man?
Again, any person who commits an awful act should face the full force of the law.
We've had multiple stabbings in the state of Missouri at laundromats in O'Fallon, Missouri, where innocent civilians were going to do their laundry of an evening and were attacked with knives, slashed, bled, stomped upon. Should the illegals who did that, should they not be deported?
As I said,
in over one this legal immigrant deported.
They should face the consequences. Are a very small the population that President Trump is promising to deport.
Well, let's talk about the rest
people.
Of the people who you don't want to be deported. You said in an article that you wrote recently, new report shows devastating costs of mass deportation. You wrote this in October. Do you remember this piece?
Yes, that is a summary of our report.
Yeah, so in this piece, and it's also in your written testimony, you talk about how much the economy will lose if the United States actually enforces our immigration laws and deports folks who are here illegally. And I want to quote you now. You say some industries would be particularly hard hit, including construction, agriculture, and hospitality, which can 1.5 million workers. What's the argument here, that there aren't American workers jobs?
No, and as I said previously, are, but the issue is
wages to rise?
I think that we want to pass a path to citizenship so we can have a level and fair playing field for every American.
Why would you want American citizens and those who are here lawfully to have to compete against illegal immigrants who, by the way, are often paid not minimum wage, who are not given the federally mandated benefits precisely because they're here illegally? Why would you want to drive down the wages of millions of working Americans who can't get those jobs in construction, agriculture, and hospitality because illegal immigrants are getting them, suppressing wages in the meantime? Why would you want to do that?
Well, if you didn't hear from my initial testimony, you know I don't want that.
Listen, I read your testimony word for word, and I've been watching it, and I know what the answer is. You don't actually care about working people because you're absolutely hell-bent on this ideological agenda of opening our border. You want to give everybody who's here a path to citizenship. You want blanket amnesty. You talk about mass deportations. That's your word, not Trump's. You want mass amnesty, right? It's right here in your testimony.
We want a path to citizenship for
That's
people
amnesty.
who pass a background check, who pay a
That's
fine.
amnesty, who you
and
just
that
said
way
there's
we'll get
millions of
a
people,
level
13
playing
million people. Right, 13 million people you want to dump into the labor force.
They are
Who
already
will drive
in the labor force,
illegally?
Senator.
They're here,
Yes.
taking jobs
So
from
let's
American
make it
citizens.
legal and avoid
perfect. So
this.
here's your plan. So just if you're wondering, America, here's the Democrats' plan. Take the 13 million plus illegals who are here, taking jobs from Americans, taking wages down, taking health care benefits, and bring them here legally so that they can continue to drive down wages, flood the labor force, and suppress all
Senator
of the
Hawley,
above.
they can't flood the labor force if they're already part of the labor force, which is
They
the
are
economic
flooding the
issue
labor
today.
force now. That's what's happening now. Why
The
do you think
majority
wages
have been here for
flatlined?
over 15 years. Many millions have been
And
here
what has
since the
happened to
Reagan
working class
administration.
wages in that time, Mr. Reichlin-Melnick?
Working class
Have they gone
wages
up?
are currently going up. Yes,
Oh, really? They've
have
gone up over the last
year.
15 years?
Over the
They're
last
up?
15 years, I will have to consult the economists on that matter.
Yeah, they're down, way down. What world do you live in? Listen,
Senator Hawley, they
here's
are
the
all-
deal. The
Are you
American
familiar with
people
the phrase,
just voted.
"Don't
The American
cut off your
people
nose to
just
spite your
voted.
face"?
Well, you know what? It's my time, not yours. So you're here to answer my questions, not to offer a soliloquy. And let me just end with this. The Americans had a good look at your economic, and they voted against it. An open border for the last facto amnesty yourself 15 plus has been a people have died lower because of it. Our streets are in chaos because of it. And now you and the Democrat Party just say more of the same, more of the same. Let's double down. I would just say to you, I think that's insanity. I think it's total insanity, and the American people do too.
Senator Hawley, we have a choice. We can either hurt the economy or help the economy. And if we want to deport 13 million
It hurts the
people-
economy to give
Senator,
American
the economy.
workers jobs?
Senator from Texas.
Elections have consequences. For the last 4 years, we have seen the most radical experiment in open borders this nation has ever seen. There are many reasons the American people showed up in overwhelming numbers to vote to re-elect Donald Trump, to elect a Republican majority in the Senate, to re-elect a Republican majority in the House, but there was no reason more front and center than the open borders of the last 4 years. And I have to say, I think there were a number of us wondering, did any of the Democrats in Congress learn anything from the election? And the existence of this hearing makes very clear the answer is no. We've seen 12 million people come into this country illegally under Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. Texas has seen Democrat for over a read this election. When your home is invaded by 1 million people, it changes your voting patterns. Every single day, we have seen Americans murdered. We have seen women raped. We have seen children brutalized by criminal illegal aliens released deliberately by Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. The numbers are staggering. According to ICE, as of July 21st, 2024, nearly 650,000 criminal illegal aliens were currently on ICE's non-defense have been released. Wondering of those 16,000, 4 have been convicted of homicide. You want to know what mass deportation? Those 14,004 better pack their bags right now. Because with a new administration, we're going to arrest you and we are going to deport you. 20,061 have been convicted of sexual assault. Now, I want you to ask of my Democrat colleagues, and it is striking that virtually none of them are here. That is reflected in their conduct because they are silent and putting their head in the sand as to the human tragedies. But what resident of what blue state says, you know what, America's better off with 20,000 rapists being released into this country? 105,146 have been convicted of assault. I would ask my Democrat colleagues if they were here, Why the hell today does the Biden administration not go and arrest every one of these criminals and deport them? What rational world says America's better off with more criminals? And these are not just statistics. Ms. Moran, thank you for being here. The country grieves the loss of your daughter. Your daughter was beautiful. She was a mom who I know loved her kids. And she's not with us today. She was raped and murdered because this administration chose to release a violent criminal into America. Your daughter should still be alive. And every one of these victims should still be alive. Laken Riley, a name that the Democrats on this committee can't bring themselves to utter, should still be alive. And in my hometown of Houston, Jocelyn Nungry, I've gotten to know Jocelyn's mother, Alexis, very well. Ms. Moran, like you, Alexis is incredibly brave. I cannot imagine the pain. I'm a father. To lose your child, no parent should have to bury their child. Children should bury their parents, not the other way around. It is wrong what happened to you. But I want to say to you, thank you for having the courage to tell Rachel's story. I would understand if you just curled up in a ball and cried. But, and I'm sure you have wept a lot of tears. But thank you for having the courage to tell Rachel's story. And I want to say, if there is anything that is a mandate from this election, it is to end this insanity, stop these murders, stop these rapes, stop these assaults, protect our citizens. And Ms. Moran, I just want to give you the opportunity at the end of my questioning to share from your perspective why this matters, why we should stop releasing criminals into America.
In order to prepare for this hearing, I was actually looking at statistics over the last couple of days. And most of the rape and murder statistics by illegal immigrants are actually against children.
Yeah.
And to me, that's astounding. I don't know how many people here have children or grandchildren, but can you imagine your 7, 8, 9-year-old daughter being forcibly raped by a stranger, sometimes multiple times? This is the culture, and I realize it's not all immigrants, but this is the culture that they come from, this kind of violence. They grow up in it in their countries. To them, it's just part of what they've known for their lives. But to bring that criminal culture into America, it's destroying our families. I know of women in my hometown that have come up to me because they know I'm Rachel's mom and say to me, some guy just ran up behind me and tried to pull me down to the ground, and if it wasn't for the fact that I could fight him off and run to a store to call the police, I might not be here. And in one incident, that man had attacked 7 other women.
Wow.
Why are we allowing this? And then the women and children that are raped, and because they're so ashamed of what's happened to them, how they've been so violated, they don't say anything. So the numbers are grossly underestimated, I believe, as far as the crimes that are happening in our country.
Thank
and
you.
I think we need to stop this.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I appreciate all the witnesses appearing before the committee today. There are obviously many questions asked about the mass deportation proposal of the president-elect. As I said earlier, I listened carefully at the Meet the Press yesterday, and I believe the magnitude of that statement is growing in the mind of the president-elect. Mr. Melnick, you certainly allude to that in terms of the number of personnel and the cost to our nation. Bottom line, we have no tolerance for keeping dangerous who've come to this country and asked to be made citizens. And we certainly have no interest in a policy that allows them to come across the border with impunity. But the mass deportation includes not only that possibility of stopping those people, but an impact on Mr. Touré and his family. I think most of us would agree that a man who's given his life to criminal prosecution is of value to us based on what Ms. Moran just mentioned. And I think we should go forward with that in mind. Let's be thoughtful and reflective and do things that make America safer and are consistent with our values. The hearing record will remain open for 1 week for additional materials to be submitted. And with that, the meeting of this committee stands adjourned. It would damage our economy and separate American families. Instead, we should focus on deporting those who are truly a danger to America, and we should give the rest a chance to earn legal status. They would have to register with the government, certainly pay their taxes, and submit to serious background checks. Most Americans, nearly 2 out of 3, agree we should give lawful status to undocumented immigrants who don't pose a threat to our country. That's what we did in 2013. A bipartisan group of 8 senators, including myself and Ranking Member Graham, drafted a bill to reform our immigration laws and secure our border. 2013 it was. That bill passed the Senate 68-32. Unfortunately, it wasn't taken up by the House of Representatives and the Republican majority. The notion behind that was that everyone would be under requirement to come forward and identify themselves to the government, all the undocumented people in this country. And if they identified themselves, went through a background check, paid their taxes, they could continue to live and work here without fear of deportation. In fact, in our bill, over a long period of time, and a really long period of time, they could be on a path to legality and citizenship. That's a starting point that I think makes sense. Not mass deportation, but mass accountability, so we know who's here. And how would it make a difference? We would go to E-Verify to make sure that if you didn't go through that process in our bill, you couldn't legally work in the United States. So there was an enforcement. It was serious. I'm glad I was part of that effort, and I hope we can return to the discussion. Over the weekend, by President-elect Trump, I watched his interview on Meet the Press. He said some positive things from my point of view, and he really challenged us on the Democratic side to work with him when it came to the Dreamers. I accept the challenge. Name the time and place, Mr. President. I'll be there. The reality is that Congress, for almost 40 years, has failed to fix our broken immigration system. We've had opportunities to do it. I hope we can find more in the future. We should use our 2013 immigration bill as a starting point instead of mass deportations. As I said, mass accountability. Let's fix our broken immigration system in a way that protects our country and honors our heritage as a nation of immigrants. Now I recognize Senator Graham.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. From our point of view over here, one of the primary issues facing the American people in 2024 for president and other elections, who is best able to control a broken border? Most Americans are sympathetic, kind-hearted people who feel like the Biden administration was criminally negligent in protecting us by having a broken border and allowing drugs to pour into our country to kill tens of thousands of young people, allow people to come in our country who are convicted felons to do damage to families we'll hear from today. That nightmare is coming to a close. In January of 2025, the Republican Senate will make its top priority a transformational border security bill that will be taken up and passed by Budget Committee, increasing the number of bed spaces available to detain people instead of releasing them, increasing the number of ICE agents to deal with people who should be deported, finish the wall, and put technology on the border, so we'll have operational control of the border. That's going to be our top priority. I want to cut taxes, we will cut taxes. But as to the Senate, transformational border security goes first through reconciliation. Over 8 million people were encountered during the Biden years, 4 million released into the country. The non-detained docket that we have as a nation is over 7 million people. There are 600 and something thousand people on that non-detained document that have criminal records. We're going to start sending people out of the country that present a threat to us and should never have been here to begin with. The politics of immigration and broken borders, according to a couple of Democratic senators, was outcome determinative. I think they're right. So as much as I respect and admire the chairman, I think your focus is misplaced here. You should be working with us to clean up this mess. You should want mass deportations of people here illegally that represent threats to our country. How did we get to where we're at? The average annual deportation for Obama and Trump was about the same. Along comes Biden, it drops like a rock. So when you have people show up and by the millions and the number of people being deported goes down by 40-something%, you're incentivizing more people to come. It is our belief that the only way you'll get control of the border is for deportations to start early so people will not pay the money to the coyotes and others to come to our border in the first place because they see people leaving, not staying. If we do not have outflow, the inflow will continue. An example of a broken immigration system was the abuse of parole by the Biden administration. Mass parole of people who did not meet the 2 criteria under the parole statute. The man who's been convicted of killing Laken Riley was paroled into the country because there was no bed space. There's nothing in the statute that allows parole because we have no place to put you. There are 38,000 beds. We're going to increase that dramatically. One of the witnesses here today, his family was destroyed by a man who had been deported 3 times. The 4th time was not a charm. So if you're here illegally, get ready to leave. If you're a criminal, we're coming after you first. If you've been paroled illegally, we're not going to give you the roots to attach yourself to our country because you should not have been here in the first place. As to the dreamers, hopefully we can find a solution to that problem. What I want to do is regain control of a broken border really quickly. The highest number of people on the terrorist watch list in our country exists today. I hope that number will go down pretty quickly. I know Senator Cornyn's on the Intel Committee. In many ways, a broken immigration system has created a ticking time bomb for our national security. So yes, the Republican Party will pass as its top priority border security, more bed spaces so you don't have to release people that shouldn't be released, and more ICE agents to deport people who represent a threat to our country and shouldn't be here to begin with. We're going to do that. And to my Democratic friends, I think if you resist rational deportation policy, you do so at your own peril. 86% of the people deported under the Trump first term were involved with criminal convictions or pending criminal matters. I have never seen such a mess. It's time to clean that mess up. So come January, help is on the way.
Thank you, Senator Graham. We have an immigration subcommittee, and chairing that committee is Senator Padilla and ranking member Senator Cornyn. They each asked for a chance to make an opening statement. I recognize Senator Padilla.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Senator Graham. I want to thank each and every one of the witnesses that are here today for obviously a timely and important discussion, but taking place during an uncertain and unnerving time for many in our nation's history. I'm going to deviate for a second from my prepared remarks just to acknowledge what Senator Graham has begun to lay out. Look, this topic, this issue, is certainly complex. It doesn't do the issue and the challenge justice to just say, well, there's so many immigrants in America, or some people say illegal, some people say undocumented immigrants in America, when you really must break it down into a number of categories. Are there some number that beyond being in the country undocumented may be involved with unlawful activities? Yes, and I don't think you're going to find Democrats saying we shouldn't be pursuing actions against violent criminals. But when Senator Graham also suggests, but I hope we can take care of the dreamers. Dreamers, as you all know, young people who were brought here by their parents at a very young age, but have grown up here and are undocumented on the eve of the next Donald Trump administration. And we've heard him for months and months and months now throughout the campaign trail promise mass deportations. We heard him over and over again commit to, quote, the largest deportation operation in American history. And we've had big ones. For folks watching at home, Google Operation Wetback and begin to do some homework. We've even heard Donald Trump say that there will be no price tag for deportations, and heard him promise on Truth Social to use the United States military to execute it. Now, I can already hear some of the rebuttals from Republican colleagues to suggest that, well, he doesn't really mean all immigrants. He's only talking about violent criminals. Well, I wish I could believe that he's only committing to targeting violent criminals, because we agree on that front. But pardon me if I'm skeptical, we've seen him. We've seen Donald Trump in the past and how he operates. Do you remember the Muslim bans he imposed early in his first term? And the family separations at the border that we witnessed for years? So I've seen enough to know that while he may plan to prioritize, in effect, he will be targeting all undocumented immigrants, which will inevitably include those without criminal convictions of any type. Now, previous administrations of both parties, we saw some stats being presented. It's been the policy of previous administrations to prioritize the deportation of those with criminal convictions. But what we're hearing from incoming President Trump isn't that. And look at who he is putting in these pivotal roles to help him execute. A loyalist in Christine Ohm at DHS, extremist Stephen Miller as Deputy Chief of Staff for Policy, and Tom Homan as border czar, who told undocumented immigrants through the press, quote, "You should be afraid," end quote. Dreamers, farm workers, that's the message. And he promised worksite raids to prosecute anyone who stands in their way. They're pushing an extremist agenda. On top of the fact that, like, separating spouses and ripping away children from their parents, citizen children from sometimes undocumented immigrant parents, isn't just cruel. It's not just morally wrong. Here's another very important reason why Americans should be concerned. For anybody whose vote this last November was motivated by high prices of food, of housing, of anything else, understand that the mass deportation Donald Trump is describing will be disastrous to our economy. Again, I'm not trying to justify those involved with criminal activity. We're on all the same page there. I'm talking about nonviolent criminal, undocumented immigrants. It is all of us, the American people, who will pay for the extremism policies that he has promised. Put aside the millions and millions and millions of dollars to find undocumented immigrants he may be targeting, to detain, and to remove through the process of deportation. For a minute, don't even count on the funds that will be necessary to hire thousands of Border Patrol and ICE agents, let alone the cost of constructing detention centers and jails for this operation. Let's focus on the impacts to the economy for American families. Because the fact is, there are millions of undocumented immigrants living in the United States today who are working in industries critical to our entire economy. Undocumented immigrants make up nearly 15% of all construction workers, for example, and roughly half of our agricultural workforce. Again, if you care about the cost of housing, you care about food prices at the grocery store, you should be paying attention. Because if tomorrow Stephen Miller could snap his fingers and have his way, our annual GDP would drop roughly 6.8%. Imagine all the losses of the Great Recession and then still shrinking the economy another 2.5 points. So what does that mean for folks at home? It's simple. Any industry with a significant percentage of undocumented immigrants will have a harder time finding workers. And I know we've all been hearing from employers and business leaders for years now about their struggle already to find sufficient workforce. Stores will have a harder time keeping the shelf stocked. And yes, prices will rise and rise and rise. So hello, America. Get ready for a more expensive food bill when you're preparing next year's Thanksgiving dinner or next year's Christmas dinner. And if you've been saving up for years and years to try to buy your first home, get ready to wait even longer because construction will slow and prices will go up. So the next time we hear Republicans say that they support Trump's plan to deport waves of undocumented immigrants, let's be clear about what comes with that. Higher prices for American families. They're supporting the forced removal of millions of hardworking community members, 80% of whom have lived here 10 years or more. These are not recent arrivals. People who have lived here for years, if not decades. They're supporting fear and uncertainty in immigrant communities that will cause untold numbers of immigrants, no matter their status, to stay home from work, from school, from shopping. And they're supporting the punishment of over 5 million workers who Donald Trump's own administration declared to be, quote, essential to our economy. Essential workers who fed us and kept us safe during the COVID-19 pandemic. So if you agree with the spirit of at least that segment deserves better, then colleagues join me in supporting the Citizenship for Essential Workers Act, the essential workers that the Trump administration deemed critical to our nation's economy and security. Let's provide them with some legal status up front and a pathway to earn citizenship because we need them. Our economy needs farm workers. I think you'd agree. Our economy needs construction workers, hospitality and transportation workers, healthcare workers, and students and innovators who help keep our economy and our country thriving. We don't need the massive deportations that the political rhetoric of the campaign cycle has brought us. And we certainly don't need the uncertainty, the fear, and the loss that we'll feel for years to come. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'm looking forward to hearing from our witnesses and to today's conversation.
Thanks, Senator Padilla. Senator Cornyn.
Thank you, Chairman Durbin. Listening to my Democratic colleagues, it's as if November 5th never occurred, that we haven't had an election, that we haven't had a referendum on the failed border policies of the Biden-Harris administration. Let's be clear, the crisis at the southern border is entirely a problem caused by the Biden administration's policies. It is a man-made disaster. The election, I believe, in large part was a referendum on those policies, and the American people spoke decisively, rejecting this as the new normal. They rejected lawlessness as the new normal.